Hi everyone, welcome to my tutorial for this crochet sweater for men for sizes from small to 5XL. For the materials you will need yarn or wool. I've used a super soft Aran category 4 worsted weight yarn. I used approximately 850 grams for a size medium. You will need a measuring tape, stitch markers, yarn or wool needle, 4mm hook for all the ribbings, a 5mm hook for the rest of the sweater, and a pair of scissors. We'll begin with the back panel. So you form your slip knot. And now you chain a length of chains. Now this length of chains must measure from the shoulder to the upper hip. And here I am, I'll be working a sample, but your length of chains will be from the shoulder to the upper hip. Now that you have your length of chains, I know mine is a lot shorter, and that's only because I'm working a sample of the stitch pattern. You will have a much longer chain. So you go ahead and count the number of chains you have and adjust the stitch count to multiple of 8 plus 5. Now for the sweater that I had made, I had used 77 stitches. So 72 is in a multiple of 8, and then add on a further 5 chains, and that makes it 77. Adjust your stitch count to a multiple of 8 plus 5 for the back panel. Round 1. Into the third chain from the hook, 1, 2, 3, half double crochet. Now if you look at that stitch, those 2 stitches that we had skipped while working our half double crochet, that counts as our first stitch. So we've in fact worked 2 stitches. Here's the first, which was the turning chain, and here's our second stitch. Now you'll continue on with half double crochets to the end of the round. So it's important that I told you that, because we will be working our first stitch from the next round, or should I say the last stitch from the next round, into that turning chain, because it counts as a stitch. So that was round 1 complete. Round 2, chain 2 and turn. So that's our first stitch. We will not work a stitch into that same stitch from where our first stitch comes out of, into that next one. And here we'll be working our rounds into either the back loop or the front loop. Now if you look at this chain, it's made up of 2 loops. A front loop, the one that's closest to you, and the back loop, the one that's away from you. So for this round, round 2, we'll work our stitches into the back loops only. So it's half double crochets into the back loops only to the end of the round. So here I am at the last stitch, and this was a chain 2 into that second chain. From chain 2 is where I'll work my last stitch. Round 3, chain 2 and turn. Now for round 3, we'll be working all our stitches into the front loops. So half double crochet into all stitches into the front loops only. again, I'm here at that chain 2. So into that second chain from chain 2, I'll work my last stitch. Now remember, always work your stitches into the second chain from chain 2 right at the end. If you don't, you'll have your pattern going askew. So basically this is the stitch pattern for the back panel. All you need to do is repeat rounds 2 and 3. And here you have it. This is the right side. Continue on with the back panel by repeating rounds 2 and rounds 3 until the width of the back panel measures the shoulder to shoulder measurement for the size that you are working plus 2 inches or 5 centimeters. Find those measurements in the next clip. Here are the shoulder to shoulder measurements for sizes from small to 5XL. Use the measurement for the size that you are working on. Remember to add on a further 2 inches or 5 centimeters. Now fold the back panel in half along the length of the panel and mark off that folded edge with a stitch marker as I have done here. We have now marked off center back. Open up the back panel and mark off on either side of center back. Mark off 3.5 inches on either side of center back for sizes small to 2XL, and for sizes from 3XL to 5XL, mark off 4.5 inches on either side of center back. And if you're working in centimeters, mark off 9 centimeters on either side of center back for sizes small to 2XL, and for sizes 3XL to 5XL, mark off 11.5 centimeters on either side of center back. We will use the back panel as a guide when working the front panel. Now set aside the back panel. We will begin with the front panel. Let's get on with the front panel. Begin with a slip knot. Using the larger of the 2 hooks, the 5mm hook, chain a length of chains. Now this length of chains must be 1 chain longer than that of the back panel. So in my case, for the sweater that I had made, I had chained 77 chains for the back panel. And for the front panel, I had chained 78 chains. Now here you see a much shorter chain, and that's only because I'm working a sample. Your chain will be much longer than the one you see here. Now if you look at the chain, here's the front of the chain, and when you turn it around, here's the back of the chain. We'll be working our stitches into these little bumps that you see along the back of the chain. Round 1. Into the 3rd chain from the hook, half double crochet. So you'll turn your chain around, and into that little bump at the back is where you'll work your first stitch. Now if you look at your stitches, those 2 chains that we had skipped forms the first stitch. It's our turning chain, but it counts as the first stitch, and we've just worked our second stitch. Continue on with half double crochets into the little bumps to the end of the round. I've continued on working those half double crochets all across. Here I am at that last bump, and I'll work my last stitch into that bump. Round 2, chain 1 and turn. Now for our front panel, we'll be working all our stitches into the back loops only. So here you see that's the back loop, and that's where we'll be working all our stitches into. Into the next 4 stitches, work slip stitches. To work a slip stitch, insert your hook into the stitch, pull up a loop, take that first loop from the hook and pull it through the second loop. So when you work your slip stitches for this pattern, try to keep your stitches loose. Otherwise, you may find it difficult to work stitches into these stitches. Into the next 4 stitches, work half double crochets. Into the next 4 stitches, work slip stitches. Into the next 4 stitches, work half double crochets. Into the next 4 stitches, work slip stitches. Continue with the stitch pattern to the end of round 2. So it's working 4 half double crochets and then 4 slip stitches and so on to the end of the round. Round 3, chain 1 and turn. Round 3 is a repeat of round 2. Into the 4 slip stitches from the round before, work slip stitches. Into the 4 half double crochets from the round before, work half double crochets. Into the 4 slip stitches from the round before, work slip stitches. Into the half double crochets from the round before, work half double crochets. Into the 4 slip stitches from the round before, work slip stitches. Continue with the stitch pattern to the end of round 3. So it's just a repeat of round 2 where we've worked slip stitches, we will work slip stitches. Where we've worked half double crochets, we will work half double crochets, and so on. Continue to the end of the round. Round 4, chain 1 and turn. Now this is where the stitch pattern changes. Where we've worked slip stitches, we will work half double crochets. So into those first 4 slip stitches, work half double crochets. Work your stitches into the back loops only throughout the pattern. Into the 4 half double crochets from the round before, work slip stitches. Into the slip stitches from the round before, work half double crochets. Into the half double crochets from the round before, work slip stitches. Into the slip stitches from the round before, work half double crochets. Continue on with the stitch pattern to the end of round 4. So here it's just the opposite now of rounds 2 and rounds 3. Round 5, chain 1 and turn. Round 5 is a repeat of round 4. Where we've worked half double crochets, we will work half double crochets into those stitches, and where we've worked slip stitches from the round before, we will work slip stitches in this round. So we've started off with 4 half double crochets, and then it's 4 slip stitches, 4 half double crochets, and so on to the end of the round. Continue on with the stitch pattern to complete round 5. Now if you look at the stitch pattern here, you can clearly see the almond shape that's being formed. And basically it's just a repeat. It's round 2 and round 3 that are the same, and round 4 and round 5 that are the same to create the stitch pattern. So this is the wrong side of the stitch pattern, and if I turn it around, here you're looking at the right side, and you can clearly see those almond shapes. Now this is the stitch pattern for the rest of the front panel. It's a repeat of round 2 to round 5. Continue on with the front panel by repeating rounds 2, 3, 4, and 5 until when the front panel is placed on top of the back panel, as I have done here, aligning these edges well. Notice that the edge of the front panel is in line with that first stitch marker. We have now completed shoulder 1 of the front panel. We will now work the neckline. I've continued on with the front panel, repeating rounds 2, 3, 4, and 5. So here I have my back panel, and I'll place the front panel on top of the back panel. Make certain to align these edges well. Now we have just completed shoulder 1 of the front panel, and here you see shoulder 1, and it lines up with that first stitch marker. Continue on with the pattern, working your way to the top edge as I have done here, and I've skipped the last 4 stitches. So here you see the 4 stitches. I'll just zoom in 1, 2, 3, 4. So skip those 4 stitches and continue on with the next round, working your stitch pattern from where you had stopped. Chain 1, turn, and hereafter follow the stitch pattern. So remember, it is important that you follow the sequence of the stitch pattern. From looking at where I've stopped, I need to continue on with slip stitches, and then it's my half double crochets. So all depending on where you've stopped, you may need to start with half double crochets and thereafter slip stitches. Continue on with your stitch pattern all the way to that bottom edge. I've worked my way down the bottom edge of the front panel and all the way back again to the top edge, stopping 4 stitches short of that notch right there. 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches short of that top edge. Now I'll work my way all the way back down, working the stitch pattern. It's chain 1 and turn, and thereafter continue with the stitch pattern from where you had stopped. Remember, it's important to follow the pattern sequence. Continue to the bottom edge. I've continued on working the stitch pattern down to the bottom, then it was chain 1, turn, work the stitch pattern back to the top. Here I left 12 stitches unstitched. So here's the 12 stitches, and then if you look at it right at the top, it was the 4 stitches, and then again 4 stitches, and now the 12 stitches. So in total we have 20 stitches unstitched. Chain 1, turn, and here you'll continue on with the stitch pattern to the bottom edge. I've continued on working the stitch pattern back and forth until that portion of the neckline measured 5 inches or 12 centimeters, as you see here. Now this is the neckline portion of the sweater. Okay, so now that we've worked the neckline, we can go ahead and work shoulder 2 along the side edge. Continuing on, chain 13. The 13th stitch counts as the turning chain, which is the chain 1. Turn and continue on with the stitch pattern to the bottom edge. Now if you look at my stitch pattern, you'll see here that I finished off on half double crochets. So I know that the next 4 stitches will be slip stitches, and the next 4 half double crochets, and the next 4 slip stitches. So I will begin this round with slip stitches. That's how you would figure out what to begin this round with. So if you finish the last round with slip stitches, so you would start the round off with half double crochets. So I hope that makes sense, but you need to start the round off correctly in order to get your stitch pattern right as you are working. Continue on with your stitch pattern to the bottom edge. Again, make certain that your stitch pattern is worked in the right sequence. I've worked my way to the bottom and then it was chain 1, and here I am back at the top edge. Now you'll chain 5, and the 5th chain counts as the turning chain, which is chain 1. Turn, continue with the stitch pattern following the pattern sequence. I've continued on working the stitch pattern down to the bottom edge, and then it was chain 1 and I've worked my way back to the top again. Then it's chain 5. The 5th chain counts as the turning chain, which is chain 1. Turn. Continue on with the pattern following the pattern sequence, working that first 4 stitches into that chain. Remember, you need to know where you stopped at, and here you see I've stopped at half double crochets in my previous round, so I will work 4 slip stitches into the chain. If you look closely here, you'll notice that I went ahead and worked single crochets instead of slip stitches. Please know that I did correct my mistake off camera. Continue with your stitch pattern to the end of the round. Now, just to give you an idea of what this all looks like, I have my back panel here, and I'll take that front panel that I'm busy working and I'll place it on top of the back panel, aligning it all with those stitch markers. So here we have shoulder 1 and then it's the neckline, and here's shoulder 2. So you'll continue on working the stitch pattern to complete shoulder 2. I've continued on and I've worked my entire front panel. Now to know that it's correct, if you fold your pieces on top of each other, they must align. And I also went one step further by counting my stitch patterns. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and here go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, making certain that they basically look the same right at the ends. You can go on and even count here. So to end the round, like how we had started off with the round of half double crochets, is exactly what I'll do on the side. For my last round, it's chain 2, turn, and here you're working half double crochets into all these stitches. Continue to the end of the round. Now that both front and back panels are complete, here I have them laid out. Here's my back panel and this is the front, and I've placed them one above the other. Now you'll notice that your front panel does appear slightly shorter than the back panel. That's only when we are stitching along these edges. That should come right, because we'll be stitching stitch for stitch along these edges. Now we'll stitch along the shoulders here. So you'll match up those and you match up here. And with your yarn needle, you can go ahead and stitch along the top edges of the shoulder. You will see there are no stitches to work with. You'll just have to get your stitches into these gaps along the top edge. So you'll continue on right to that stitch marker here, and then on the other side you'll stitch from there to there as well. That I have both shoulder stitch, we will now work the neckline. So right at this bottom edge here, right there is where we'll attach yarn. Attach yarn to that corner of the neckline using the 4mm hook. Chain 14 chains for sizes from small to 2XL, and for sizes from 3XL to 5XL, chain 18 chains. Round 1 of the ribbing into the 3rd chain from the hook, half double crochet. Continue with half double crochets into all chains. I've worked my way to the end of round 1 for the ribbing, and I have 13 stitches. So now that our ribbing is complete, I just want to change my hook here. Now that the ribbing is complete, we need to join this edge of the ribbing to the actual neckline. So in order to do that, we need to slip stitch into those stitches from the neckline. So that was one slip stitch, and here's my second slip stitch. Round 2, turn. So you'll need to skip those 2 slip stitches those two and work your stitch into the actual ribbing. So continue on with half double crochets into all stitches for the ribbing. Always keep track of your stitch count for the ribbings. Continue to the end of the round. I've continued on and I'm at the end of round 2. Here I am at the last stitch. Always remember to work your last stitch into that second chain from chain 2. Otherwise, you may find your ribbing going askew. Round 3, chain 2 and turn. Continue on with half double crochets to the end of round 3. Here I am at the end of round 3 and my stitch count remains the same. Now we need to join the edge of the ribbing to the actual neckline. So I'll slip stitch into a stitch, and here's my second slip stitch. And then you'll turn for round 4, skip the 2 slip stitches that we've worked and work your first stitch into that third stitch, working into the back loops only. Continue on working half double crochets to the end of the round. Continue working the ribbing up until you get to that notch. At these 2 notches, we will increase our stitch counts by 2 stitches. So once you get to the notch, we will continue from there. Here I am at that first notch. I will slip stitch into that edge of the notch. That's my first slip stitch, and my second slip stitch will be into that corner before it takes a turn to the top. So I've worked 2 slip stitches and then it's turn. So when you're working the next round, you will work your first stitch into the first slip stitch. So this is where it changes, and then you'll work your second stitch into the second slip stitch. So in actual fact, we've increased our stitch count by 2 stitches. For sizes small to 2XL, you now have 15 stitches. For sizes 3XL to 5XL, you now have 19 stitches. Continue on working half double crochets to the end of the round. I've completed the round, and then it's chain 2, turn, continue with half double crochets to the end of the round. So here I am at the end of the next round, and it lines up with that second notch. So I'll work this in the same way that I had worked the first notch. I'll slip stitch right into the corner of that notch and then slip stitch along the top corner of that turn. And so when I turn for my next round, I'll work my first stitch into the first slip stitch and my second stitch into the second slip stitch, thereby increasing my stitch count by a further 2 stitches. So for sizes small to 2XL, you now have 17 stitches, and for sizes 3XL to 5XL, you now have 21 stitches. Continue on with half double crochets to the end of the round. So this is the ribbing for the neckline, and you'll continue on in the same manner, working those stitches into the back loops only all the way across the neckline. Remember to slip stitch into that neckline, and here you're keeping your stitch count at 17 stitches throughout until you get to the opposite side where we'll get to those notches again. And there, at that point, we need to decrease. We need to get back onto 15 stitches, and then for sizes small to 2XL, or 19 stitches for sizes 3XL to 5XL, and then at that last notch we need to get back onto 13 stitches or 17 stitches. So you continue on, and like I've done here, and I've worked my way all around. Now if you feel that at the corners you do want to stretch out the ribbing, you can go ahead and work only one slip stitch at the corners. By working only one slip stitch into the corner of the neckline, you're actually using less of your stitches from the neckline, and you're creating more of the ribbing there. So that's something that you could try out to stretch out the corners if you'd like, but I haven't done so. It's just an option. So here I am at that first notch on the other side. I'll work my first slip stitch and then my second slip stitch into that, right at that edge of the notch. Now I'll turn, and now I need to bring down my stitch count. I need to bring it back down to 15 stitches or 19 stitches, all depending on the size that you're working. So you can go ahead and count the number of stitches that you have. You need to decrease on the number of stitches that you have by 2. So you go ahead and count your stitches, and then right at the start of this round, you skip those stitches to drop down to a stitch count of 15 stitches for sizes small to 2XL and 19 stitches for sizes 3XL to 5XL. I have worked my way, and at this point my ribbing fits into those 4 stitches in between the 2 notches. So I'll work 2 slip stitches at that point and then turn and continue on with my ribbing. I now am at the second notch. So I'll slip stitch into the corner, and then I'll slip stitch right at that edge of the notch, turn, and here I need to decrease my stitch count, get it to 13 stitches for sizes small to 2XL and 17 stitches for sizes 3XL to 5XL. So I'll decrease by 2 stitches by skipping 2 stitches right at the start of this round. Continue on. Make certain that your stitch count is always correct. At this point, you should have 13 stitches for sizes small to 2XL and 17 stitches for sizes 3XL to 5XL. I've worked my way to the edge of the neckline, right at that center front. So you can now go ahead and fasten off, leaving behind a long enough tail to help with the seaming. You will need to seam these two edges of the ribbing to the neckline. We will now seam along the sides of our sweater. So to do so, we need to mark off the armhole depths on either side. Here are the armhole depth measurements for sizes from small to 5XL. Choose the measurement for the size that you are working. Measure the armhole depths for the size that you're working on either side of the sweater from the top edge working downwards. Mark off with stitch markers. We now need to seam along the sides of the sweater. Leave the armhole depths open and seam from the bottom edge working upwards to the stitch markers marking off the armhole depths. When seaming, match stitch for stitch as you go along. We will now work the sleeves. So attach your yarn to the armhole, the underarm of that sleeve opening as I have done here. Then it's chain 2, and here we're working half double crochets all around the sleeve, but the stitch pattern is the same as for the back panel, where for the first round we will work our stitches into the back loops only, and for the second round we will work our stitches into the front loops. Continue working your stitches into the back loops only for round 1 to the end of the round. Here I am at the end of round 1. To complete the round, into the second chain from chain 2, slip stitch to join. Round 2, chain 2 and turn. So here we're working half double crochets all across. We're working those half double crochets into the front loops only. I've worked my way to the end of round 2 to end that round. Into the second chain from chain 2, slip stitch to join. So here on out, you're repeating rounds 1 and 2 for the rest of the sleeve, just as you had done for the back panel. Now as we work our way down the sleeve needs to taper off. So we will work 2 decreases for the sleeve to taper off as we go down the sleeve. Now, okay, so here I need to fasten off on those ends. Okay, so anyway, we will work our first decrease on the one side of start into the first 2 stitches, and our second decrease on the other side of start into the last 2 stitches. So to work a decrease, okay, we'll chain 2 to start the round, and then it's turn, and to work our decrease, it's yarn over, insert your hook into the first stitch, pull up a loop, insert your hook into the second stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, and go through all 4 loops on the hook. And that was the first decrease. You'll continue on with half double crochets until the last 2 stitches. I've worked my way to the end of the round, and here I am with 2 stitches to go. Into those 2 stitches, I'll work a decrease. Yarn over, insert your hook into the first stitch, pull up a loop, insert your hook into the next stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, and go through all 4 loops on the hook. So to complete the round, into the second chain from chain 2, slip stitch to join. I've continued on with the sleeve, repeating rounds 1 and 2 until I have the right length that I'm looking for my sleeve to be at. Now, with regard to those decreases, you will work those decreases whenever you need to. Like when I got to the elbow, I worked my next decrease, and thereafter I worked decreases after every 3rd round. So into every 4th round, I worked a decrease. And here you can see that as I went along, the sleeve tapered off. We will now work the ribbing for the sleeve. So continuing from where we had stopped, you'll use your smaller hook, which is the 4mm hook, and then it's chain 9. Round 1, into the second chain from the hook, single crochet. Continue on with single crochets to the end of the round. I've worked my way to the end of round 1 for the ribbing, and I have 8 stitches. So now we need to join the ribbing to the actual sleeve. So here, if you find that the width of your sleeve edge is quite big and you'd like to tighten up on that, you can skip a stitch as you're working these slip stitches. So by skipping a stitch, you actually tighten up on the ribbing. So you work 2 slip stitches into the sleeve itself, and here I've got the other sleeve that I've worked, and you can see that I've tightened up on the ribbing by skipping stitches as I slip stitched. And then you'll work your way back up the ribbing, working 8 stitches. That's 8 single crochets into the ribbing. Remember to work your stitches into the back loops only for ribbings. Continue on working single crochets into the back loops only, back and forth all the way around the sleeve. Here I am with the ribbing that's complete, and I know it's complete when I bring these 2 edges together. They are able to join or meet each other. So then I fastened off, leaving behind a long enough tail to help with the seaming. We will now work the ribbing along the bottom edge of the sweater. Find center back. So here's the front, and if I turn it around at the bottom edge, running straight down the center is where center back is. Attach yarn to that center back. Remember, here again we're using the 4mm hook. Chain 9 and continue on with the ribbing just as we had done for the sleeve, working our way all around this bottom edge of the sweater. So with the sweater, you'll notice that there are no actual stitches to work into. You will work your stitches into the little gaps that you see along that bottom edge. Now, if you do want to tighten up on the ribbing for your sweater, you'll need to sort of stretch out your slip stitches, like skip a few gaps in between your slip stitches, and that helps to tighten up on the ribbing, just as you had done for the sleeve edging. I've continued on completing the ribbing, and at this point I know my ribbing is complete when the two edges of my ribbing are able to meet. Go ahead and seam those two edges to join. Now that the ribbing's complete, the only thing left to do is to weave in all these ends. So you'll take your yarn needle and attach it, or thread your yarn through that needle. And here the thing is to seam into these stitches, going back and forth. The whole idea is to lose these tail ends as you go along. Weave in all tail ends to complete.